Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is why Indigenous agriculture is good for the planet, and it will be presented by our fabulous NatHab expedition leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today and for bringing us yet another fascinating topic. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Very happy to be here. Just sharing something more about the nature of Mexico and all the different perspectives where we can see nature everywhere. I really wanted to go with this painting first to show you a little bit of how important the milpa, the native indigenous agriculture is for the cultural topic in Mexico, for the history of Mexico, or what we are, who we are as Mexicans. This painting is from the late 50s from a Mexican painter, Ezequiel Negrete. And here we see the name of the painting is the harvest of the corn, the harvest of the maize, la cosecha del maíz. And we can see a family, different members of a family with traditional dresses, the ladies. I'm pretty sure these are either Otomis or Mazahua people because of the dresses that they are wearing. And you can see, well, kids are there, the young, like teenagers, are helping over here, the father, the young men, and we can see several different crops. Um, of course, maize, the corn is the main one, but together with this, all of the herbs that we see down here, we can see pumpkins, squash, we can see either chile or tomato plants over here, and among others that, well, it's a kind of difficult to identify unless you see them or zoom in a little bit. But all of those are plants that are associated to this agricultural system that is called milpa. So what is a milpa? What can we? How can we define milpa? Basically, the word comes from the Nahuatl, from two different words mixed in one, mili and pan, that it means nothing more than what is sown on top of the plot. So the milpa refers to what you have, the crops that you have in one piece of land. So it can be a small one, can be your garden actually. It can be a big field, couple of acres, some hectares. Basically the milpa would be what you have planted on top of that field. The milpa, it's a very ancient agricultural system. It's a very complex one also because it encompasses several species. It's made of several different species, so it is actually called a polyculture system. And because of the interactions that all of these species have, not only the plant ones, but also the animal species that we can find within a milpa, it's also considered an ecosystem. So it's something that the researchers and the agricultural engineers called an agroecosystem because we take things from that for human consumption, for using, but it's also very natural. Let's say we're halfway in between like a natural space and a completely modified field for crops. So basically, that would be like the idea of a milpa. The milpa has been in this area in the world for at least 5,000 years. Uh, there is no like a very specific date of where or when the milpa started. But of course, we just had some webinars on the domestication and the beginnings of the agriculture in the Americas. Most of them started in the northern part, in the northern hemisphere, started in the Mesoamerican area, 10,000, 12,000, 9,000 years ago. So a few thousand years later of that, pretty sure that the milpa system and the like agricultural system started. There are also there are some clues that take us, for example, for the Native American cultures that give us dates of 2,000, 3,000 years ago when they had a milpa system very well established and they were living out of the agriculture. So I'm pretty sure you have heard of the Three Sisters companion planting. This is something very similar to the milpa. The basic uh, triad that we have, the basic three plants that we have is corn, beans, and squash. The milpa in Mexico and in some other areas in the world nowadays differs a little bit from this very basic elemental concept of the Three Sisters planting, in which we have other plants adapted to this too as well. Let me just go and explain a little bit on detail on the Three Sister planting. So the corn is like the staple of this agricultural system. Is the most important in general terms or air quoting crop for this uh, agro ecosystem, because it gives a structure to the plants that are that need to climb. For example, legumes like faba beans or regular beans. So the corn was very important since the very beginning, and then other plants were associated to it. The beans are very, very important in terms of nutrition for the other crops. They have an association with microbes, with bacteria that are able to take the nitrogen from the air and fixate it in the soil. So all the plants that are around the legumes, this is something that most of the legumes do. Uh, the plants that are associated to these plants, to the beans and other legumes, they can take the nitrogen from the root system of the beans and the other legumes. So think about the roots of the plants being a net, and they are all interconnected, and they are all communicating to each other, but also helping each other. So, for example, the corn gives the stability to the bean, but it doesn't really fixate the nitrogen, or it's not so efficient when it's taking the nutrients, the nitrogen specifically, from the soil. So by having the beans right next to the roots and mixing the roots together, the corn is going to take also the benefit of the bacteria that are fixating the nitrogen. So that's one of the links that this system has. The other sister, or the other important crop in this milpa agricultural system is the squash or pumpkins. Uh, if you know, the squash grows on the ground. It grows horizontal. So we have the corn growing vertical and the beans, and then we have the squash growing horizontal. The benefit that we have with this association is that the squash leaves make shade on the ground, around the leaves, around the corns, around the beans, and the leaves make this coverage and make the soil to have a stable temperature, to keep the moisture of the soil. Even if it's in a very dry environment, the soil will still keep the moisture thanks to the shade of these leaves, the squash leaves. And that allows the good microbes and the beneficial plants also to grow around also the milpa, around and between the milpa. The other good thing about the squash leaves growing in between the milpa is that it prevents weeds from growing. So the native people, the indigenous people, and the people that is the agricultors that are farmers that are still working with this type of agriculture, they allow some plants to grow, but the pumpkin will help them to keep the weeds on the limit. Uh, so there is no only these are the three most important plants or crops within the milpa, but there is no only one type of milpa. It's not only these three. The thing here is that we have milpas basically on every community, one different milpa per family, per community, per climate area, because all of these factors are different. So they modified the species that are available, or they put some pressure. For example, uh, the weather conditions will put some pressure on the same species of corn, and they will have different characteristics. So one milpa in the northern area of Mexico is going to be very different. Let's say in Chihuahua is going to be very different to the milpa that we can find in Chiapas, in the southern part of Mexico. Even if we plant exactly the same species of squash, the same species of beans, or the same species of corn, they will have different plants associated to that environment. And of course, the farmers, the people that is taking care of the milpa, will have different needs, and they will have different knowledgement of how to grow a milpa, or how to grow the different crops. So there are many types of milpas. uh, for example, one of those that I found to be very interesting is the milpa chichipera, that is associated to plants that are adapted to dry climates, to dry weather. So here, for example, we can find cacti. In between the milpa, we can have a prickly pear, or the dragon fruit cacti in the area. We can find an association with mesquite tree. Those are timber also trees, or we can have the fruit of the mesquite, and also agave plants. So we can have like all of these integral agriculture in this very dry environment. So you don't only have the corn or the maize, but you also have other plants that help this area to be complete, the crop to be complete. Another type of milpa is the chinampa. Later on in another webinar coming soon, I will speak a little bit more about this. But the chinampas basically are pieces of land that were built in lakes, or rivers, or canal systems. Um, so you can grow there the same, the triad, the corn, beans, and squash, but you can also grow a lot of vegetables, a lot of flowers. You can grow herbs that need a lot of water, a lot of humidity in the soil. And well, specifically, chinampas are a very fantastic agricultural system. We can talk about that in the next webinar, but it's something that you need to keep in mind. It's different depending where you are and what plants you have associated. Another type of milpa that is very important and is very unique is the ichcol, that is the Mayan milpa. And I will go a little bit deeper on this one because it actually was named an important agricultural heritage system in 2022 by the FAO. So the ichcol milpa, it's a system that we call this agroforestal. That means that you use the forest that you have around you within your agricultural cycle. I don't know if that makes sense. Agroforestal. So basically, what the people in the Mayan, in the Yucatan Peninsula with the Mayan heritage do is that they cut the forest, part of the forest. I will go by place. The first step is to cut the forest to clear the area and then plant some of the most basic milpa crops. You have the corn, you have the beans, squash, but you also have other tubercles, and you have some other herbs that need like a lot of sun, that are that they do good by being like in this open space without the forest. The next and that's like a yearly cycle, that you have a crop yearly in the very first stage. On the second stage, you still plant crops from the very first stage, that the ones that you have the yearly harvest, but you also plant other trees or other plants that need more time for produce the fruit to be harvested. For example, you start planting the citric, you start planting papaya trees or banana trees, and here these let's say secondary crops will grow a little bit more than the first crops that you have, than the corn, squash, and beans. So you will have less production of those first crops, but then in a long term you will have a higher variety of production. Then the next step is to have like these mature fruital trees. You start planting timber trees. You start planting other type of herbs that don't need so much direct sun ray, and you are projecting to have a harvest in years. So in the previous steps, in the previous stages of the each call milpa, you are planning in a term of 5 years, more or less. But then when you arrive to the third and fourth stage of the each call milpa, you are planning on harvesting in terms of 10 years or 15 years. So they also allowed a lot of native fauna to be in the area. When you get to the fourth stage, is when you have like most of the mature timber trees, and you produce, for example, wood for your homes, or wood for furniture, or you just sell the products of those mature trees, of the mature forest. And then we have the cycle starting again. So basically, that would be the importance of the each call milpa. And if you notice, this is a long-term management. That's why it's so important, so different, and it is because that is the reason why it get the degree of important agricultural heritage by the FAO. So well, see, as I mentioned, the each call has like this agroforestry management. If we have the chinampas in the water area, if we have the milpa chichipera in the dry forest, those are the mix of all of those. The varieties give us the Mexican milpas. Another very important association that I didn't go very deep in here is the chili pepper. They the chili pepper is planted also in between the crops to scare away predators, mostly mammals that come. They can be rabbits or squirrels, raccoons. They don't like the flavor and the scent of the chili pepper. So basically, that's what they do as well. I want to talk a little bit about this specific type of harvest within the milpa. So now you have the idea of what a milpa is. It's not only corn, bean, and squash. You can also have the trees, fruit trees, or timber trees, but you can have a lot of herbs growing in between all of these crops. In Mexico, we call them quelites in Spanish. They have many other different names depending on the language here in the country. And basically, the quelite can be any part, any tender part of a crop. So, for example, quelite can be the flower of the squash. It can be the tender growth of the cucumber plant or the bean plant, or it can be specific herbs that are like tolerate or harvest within the milpa as well. The good thing about having the quelites is that they don't compete with the main crops because they are harvested before they get mature. So you can have the squash plant, for example. You have the beans, you have the corn, and then the squash starts growing all the veins, all the little roots, and then you harvest them. So they are not directly competing with the nutrients that is the corn and the bean needs. So that's something that is very, very important to know, because you can have those also in a small place, in a garden, like field. There are more than 350 species of quelites. As you can see, all of those are green because they are harvested in the immature phase. So any time that you come to Mexico and you hear that word, or you have the chance to try one of these herbs, please do so, because they are very important in the nutritional aspect. They have a lot of minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, fatty acids, and you can have them as the main component of the dish, or you can add them as condiments, as spices on the dishes. So you will have a lot of chances to try the quelites if you come to central Mexico. They are very, very popular in the southern part of Mexico as well. And I'm not very sure if in the northern part of Mexico, because I think for the dry conditions of the milpas over there, I think these type of herbs are more like produced within the the gardens, like inside the homes, rather than in the milpa field. And well, as I mentioned, the milpa has also other, not only plants, but fauna, other animals associated to it. Back on the day in ancient times, with the pre-Hispanic cultures in Mesoamerica, and still in some areas of Mexico with this traditional agriculture system, people used to hunt from the garden, hunt from the milpa area, from the field. So they provided, and still provide, food for the wild animals. Let's say squash for the rabbits in central Mexico. They will plant more of those specific crops to attract the wild fauna, and then they will hunt them for the local consumption. Nowadays, the local agriculture system, uh, the farmers leave these extra plants for the wild animals, and they don't hunt them as much because now we have other food sources. Nevertheless, it's still a very important source of nutrients for the milpa farmers. And well, the milpa is important in general terms for humans and for the planet, because in the last 100 years, a little bit more, up to 75% of the genetic diversity of plants has been lost. That is because most of the farmers, they want like a high yielding variety of crop, so they move into the monoculture. In these cases, for example, sometimes those are genetically uniform, like the genetically modified organisms that we have in corn or soybeans or wheat, even rice. And that is well because in terms of economics, they can invest a little bit less and have more profit out of it. But in terms of biodiversity and health, well, we are losing in general terms. So 75% of the world's food now rely only in 12 plants and 5 animal species. So if we think about that, we are losing not only the biodiversity of the crops that we can consume, but also we are losing the nutrients that we can have from these extra plants that we are not having nowadays. So, well, uh, what's important, or why I mention this, why it's important to know, because the milpa, being a polyculture system, give us a wide variety of nutrients, of edible plants, even edible animals. And well, in general terms, it promotes the biodiversity of an area. So in this diagram, for example, we can see how the biodiversity in a polyculture area is huge. We have um, insects, we have reptiles, we have variety of mammals in here, both prey and predators. But then if we move to the monoculture, we just erase a lot of those important elements of the ecosystem, and that can be bad in long term, because if we see the right side of the diagram, when we uh, diminish the number of predators, specifically we'll talk about predators, the number of pests, in this case the prey that are could be mice, could be squirrels, they will be growing exponentially, and they will affect the crops. So it's pretty much like a boomerang. We start moving, taking away the variety of at this very basic level of crops, and then we start taking away the variety of predators. So when it comes back to us, the uh, the problem that we have here is the amount of pests that we can have, the of non-beneficial fauna that we have in the crops. So another thing that why we should have like more indigenous crops, indigenous agriculture going on, is that of course when you have a monoculture, or only one species of crop in one area, and more if it's a GMO, you will need, of course, pesticides and herbicides, and you will need to add fertilizers to the soil. So eventually, that will have an ambiental cost. You will have bad outcomes in a long term scale, and sometimes in a short term scale that we can see. If we move to the milpa system, or the indigenous agricultural system, as I mentioned, is the agroforestal system. Basically, we have like this chain, or network interconnected, that is pretty much sustainable, self-sustainable. Naturally, you can control the pests, the plagues. If you have the predators, you can control the prey that are affecting the crops. If you leave, for example, the natural herbs to grow around the crops, you have nutrients that are coming back into the soil. If you have, for example, well, in general, all of the crops, they need pollinators. Let's just say, I just remember the squash, for example, that needs some bees only feed on the pollen, on the nectar of the squash flowers. So you have like all of these pollinators helping you to have like a more sustainable way of having the crops. So that's a beneficial long-term relationship with the environment. The other thing, for example, if we don't want to be so pure in the crop system with the agroforestal agriculture, or the indigenous agriculture, what we can do is a type of crop that is called a circular crop, or basically what it means is you take one plot of land and you plant legumes, for example, only beans. Then on the one right next to it, you plant only cereals. In this case, the image shows wheat. It can be the corn as well. And then you leave one part of your field empty, air quoting, because you will allow other plants or weeds to grow naturally. Next, on the next season for the crops, you will rotate that, and you put the legume where the cereal was, and then the cereal where the empty plot was, and then you leave one of the other plots empty. So in this rotation system, in this circular system of cropping, you will have the soil naturally recovering. So you won't need so much fertilizer, you won't need so much herbicides or pesticides, because each part of the plot will be also self-sufficient, and you can have like different plots doing the same at the same time and rotating and um, like compensating one to each other. So the milpa system, well, it was made here or established here in Mesoamerica, but now it is expanding to the world, not only the Americas, but outside to the world. This specific document, this paper here, it's from research in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't remember exactly what country, but well, just the green part of Africa right below the Sahara Desert. And of course, the corn is a crop that is very popular over there. And what they saw is that they have, well, specific insects, specific pests that were affecting the corn. What they developed was a mix of systems. They have a system, a local system named push-pull technology, and then they try to have the milpa adapted also or mixed with this push-pull system. The push-pull system is something very, very clever. I didn't know about this, and I found it to be very interesting. And basically, it is about planting in between the rows of corn, planting species of plants that naturally repel pests. In this case, for example, in this specific paper that I mentioned, they were working with a plant named Desmodium, with a species of the genus Desmodium. This plant specifically expelled a certain scent that repelled a type of fly that was a parasite of the maize. And then they were just like scare away from the central part of the crops, and on the sides of the plot of the land they were planting a specific type of grass named bracharia species, and that grass attracted those type of flies. You remember the corn is a grass, so they were looking for something similar. They moved to the bracharia grass that was outside of the field, and then they saw that this was not enough because they still had certain um, weeds and certain other non-beneficial plants. Well, they consider them non beneficial. So what the idea that they had was to take this Mesoamerican triad and adapt it to the sub-Saharan Africa. So what they did was in between the rows, right next to the desmodium plants that were the protectors of the corn, they planted some vegetables that were beneficial crops for them and that were covering the central part of the rows. So at the end, they had this polyculture that was an adaptation, a mix of the milpa and the push-pull system. So they were just preventing the pests from this specific is the fly that was parasiting the maize. They improve the soil nutrients by the nitrogen fixation by the desmodium, and then they improve the quality of their crops by adding other vegetables that were complementary to the first ones. So, well, that's something um, that we can learn in general terms. For example, in your garden, if you have like a plot of land and you are planting, I don't know, just to say something, carrots or potatoes, try to plant something mixed. Not only leave it like right next to the other, but give some room for other plants to grow in between, and have benefits of each other. Another very important thing about the milpa system is that it is a very important way of get all the nutrients that a person needs on the day by day. These two papers here, that those are very very interesting. If you have the chance to read them, they are available to the public. They they were checking if the people with the milpas in their yards, in their the family garden, were having enough nutrients, or if they had as many nutrients as those that don't have a milpa for their personal consumption. And at the end of the reviews of the researchers, what they saw was that people having the milpa and consuming the products from the family milpa had up to 80% of the nutrients that they needed on the day. So that included the quelites that I mentioned, the herbs, the tender herbs. That included, of course, the triad, beans, squash, and corn, but also the other products that are associated to the milpa, the animals that come to them, other the fruit trees, other seeds that are grown around the milpa. So that is like a like a something that we can start doing at home to have an option on the food security that now we are facing because of the climate change, because of the genetically modified organisms, or because of the economics that problems that we are facing. So, for example, if you plant a small area of crops of this kind in your place, you, for example, you will have like available, I don't know, este, uh, once again, that's the only one I can think of, squash, potatoes, carrots, uh, in your home without going to the supermarket, or without going here in Mexico to the market every week, for example. And then you will have the certainty that it is something healthy that was produced on their, I don't know, ecologically friendly ways, without so many pesticides, without so many herbicides. And at the end, also, is something important for you as human to be connected with the earth, with the soil that is giving you the food that you need. And well, we're almost on time here. If you want to know more about the each goal, like all the details and why it is considered such an important agricultural heritage, um, uh, go to the FAO website. I copied like the whole thing up here because just by looking also each call global important agricultural heritage system, you can find that online. If you want to know more about the Three Sisters, is the story and ways of how to work with them, go to you can go on YouTube, and there's a lot of videos. This one I found to be very educative, very interesting. And well, you can also go on your what is that? The Wildlife Service in the government in the US, because they have like a specific area also for the native agriculture, and nowadays is becoming more and more popular. So you can actually buy a bag of seeds that are already mixed, and then you just like start planting on your own. It's very, very fun. So basically that would be it. I think we are just on time. Thank you very much for attending. Any questions, Sunny? Over to you.
Melissa, thank you so much. That is really, I've heard Three Sisters so many different times in my life, but I've never heard it explained as well as you did today. And just to show all the ways that these plants benefit each other. It's just such a neat ecological system. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
Thank
Before
you.
we
Yes.
start the Q&A, I'd like to remind everyone that they can submit their questions via the questions field in the control panel. Um, okay, so the first one we have is how do you keep out the insects, worms, or animals from damaging your crops?
So it depends which one specifically, but for example, as I mentioned, some mammals or a lot of mammals don't like the chili peppers. So the local farmers, the traditional farmers, what I have seen and what I read is that they have like the main milpa area, and then around the milpa and in between the maize, for example, every 2 or 3 corns, they plant chili peppers. So they have like this natural defense against these mammal predators. Another one that I saw was, for example, in the dry areas, milpa, they plant agave plants around, so that also keeps like the I'm just focusing on like on rabbits and squirrels and raccoons and mammals that are coming into the milpa around outside. I'm sorry. So basically, they try to use other plants that are also in the area to prevent these animals to come. In the case of insects, for example, as I mentioned in Africa, you have other type of plants that are maybe you won't consume them eventually, but they will help you during the growing of the crops that you have. In this case, well, the desmodium, but we can find other types of. I'm just thinking about, I don't know. Mm, I cannot think of any like specific species for insects, but I'm pretty sure that there should be some that you plant alongside or outside of the crop to attract the insects outside instead of inside to the milpa. So
Hmm.
basically, that's the way they have done this. Of course, actually, in modern times, they use some pesticides, they use some chemical products to do so, but in the most natural way is just the use of natural products applied in the milpa system.
Hmm. Fascinating. Um, the planting of the Three Sisters is also very common here in the southwestern United States in indigenous
Mhm.
communities. Do you know anything about the transfer of information there? If the people from Mexico shared information about this approach or anything about
Mhm.
migratory routes or things like that, just how this information has been shared across what we know
Yeah,
now today as boundaries.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we have the boundaries nowadays, but back on the day, thousands of years ago, even hundreds of years ago, still not so far away in time, there were a lot of commercial routes. So, for example, I don't know, some people in the southern part of the states had something that people in southern Mexico wanted, for example, and they were just doing some trades. Okay, I can give you this corn and in exchange of I don't know, this wolf skin that you hunted. Yeah, of course. So they were just exchanging, and they were also exchanging like this knowledge of how to grow one together, one crop next to the other. Um, the other thing that on recent days, on modern days, that I just learned with this webinar is that a lot of ¿cómo se dice? Migrants from the Mayan area, from the Yucatan Peninsula, moved to, I think it was in Arizona, if I remember correctly. So they were making like these Mayan communities in the U.S. and they were planting traditionally the crops in this area of the states. So like let's say modern Mayans were moving to the states and they were taking all that knowledge with them. So yeah, there is a lot of exchange, cultural exchange, and in specifically this term, well, it has been for millennials, for centuries, what they have been doing. So that's what I learned very recently about it.
I- Interesting.
Mhm.
The next question is not very clear to me, but I'm going to read it because it might mean something to you. In the IC or ick cool cycle, won't people still need the basic food crops, corn, beans, etc.? How does this work out if you're planning for the long term?
Mhm. You will live. The question I think that they are asking is in the Ishkol crop, the milpa system, the Maya milpa system. This one, people still needs the corn, the bean, the squash, and the other basic is the crops. So what they do is that they don't plant the whole plot of land. This milpa system is at least 2 hectares of land, if not more, because actually it's a community system. It's a community land. We call those. I think I might mention that in another webinar. Ejidos, which is a like a traditional way of government in between, like an area of a geographical area. So the people, the community people living there, they all have like this plot, and one part of the plot will always be is the milpa, like the triad, the corn, the bean, and the squash. One of those will be the milpa with the other herbs and the other not so long term harvest crops. And then the rest of the area will have this cycle. Eventually they're going to be rotating, but eventually we are talking in generation times. So that's why it's so like important and complex, and that's why the FAO had this like designation, because it's something that needs to be preserved, because of the importance that it has for generations. So well, that's how they, going back to the question, to the answer, that's how they do. They still have like crops that they use yearly or by season, but then part of the plot will remain for the future harvest, for the timber, for the fruits, in terms of years. So basically, that's how like they do it. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Um, with the mature forest agriculture, how much area is proportionately forest slowly growing to the three crop area? And how long can they grow crops before needing to rotate the next stage? Does that make
So
sense?
yeah, it's basically linked to this one, connected, sorry, to this type of agroforestry. Mm, So basically, the corn is a yearly crop. So every year you will have one harvest. In the very traditional way, you depend on the rain for the harvest. So you need to plant when it's rainy season, so they get the water from like the natural rains. If we just stick to that, they will have one harvest per year. So it's a yearly cycle within the milpa, within the basic milpa. But the actual time where the milpa is taking the nutrients from the soil is just like 5 months, no more than, yeah, like 6 months on the top. So you have like other 6 months to leave the soil or the plot empty and to regenerate. I don't know if that makes sense. So yearly you will have like a harvest of corn, beans, and squash, just to put it in a simple answer. And then eventually you will have like all the other fruits around, the trees around, where you can harvest the fruit. That would be yearly, but until like maybe in 5 years. And then eventually you will have more, like I mentioned, the trees, the timber trees, that you basically leave them there to grow until they are mature enough to be taken. So yearly you will have the basic crops, and then eventually you can have the other fruits. So you won't really move your basic crop, the milpa, the three sister milpa. You won't move it from that area until maybe 10 years. So if we have, just to put it a number, 4 hectares, 1 hectare will be 1/4 of that is going to be for the milpa for 5 years. But you only have the land under work for 5, 6 months. And then the other 3 hectares, the other 3/4, you're going to have a mix of the milpa and then fruits and then timber wood. So when you finish using the oldest one, that is the one that takes more time, that is the timber wood, you will rotate for other, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And then you will move the milpa to the other side. You will move it. So it's not so square in terms of 1/4 is for milpa, 1/4 is for this and for that, but it's more or less how it works. So people in the traditional agriculture, they know which hill or which plot of land is going to work better for each one of the crop systems that they want to implement. So I don't know if that makes sense, but basically that's how they do it. They just start rotating, but just think about long term benefit is the beneficial or long term work in this type of milpa.
Yeah, very, really brilliant way of looking at it. Um,
Okay.
one last quick question. Do farmers have issues with poisonous snakes when they're walking around the plants?
Yeah, that's an issue that they have had in these areas of Mexico. For example, in the northern part of Mexico, we have rattlesnakes, we have coral snakes. Central part of Mexico, the same. Southern part, we have, well, we do have coral snakes in the southern part of Mexico. But what people here, what they know to do, what to do, is basically they go with a stick before they step on the area, or they have companion animals. They either have dogs, or they have the cattle around. I don't know. They can have either cows or pigs sometimes, or birds. They have ¿cómo se llama? Hens, turkeys. So basically, all of these animals either scare away the venomous, the poisonous snakes, or they can actually eat them as well, like the hens and the turkeys, they can eat snakes. So basically they have like different ways they take care of themselves as well as they take care of the land. So they just go, either if they have no companion animals, they can go with a stick, just hitting the or going like before they go on the trail, on the ¿cómo se dice? Sí, in between the crops. Or well, there's several people, so the snakes go away. But yeah, there are snakes also in the crops in here.
Well, that is the last question we have time for today, so I will hand it back to you for closing comments.
Yeah, well, just look for more information. This is such a wide topic. Is I let out a lot of information that I wanted to put in here, but do your research online. It's very easy, very nothing technical, and try it at home. If you have a piece of land, just like a fun project with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors, this is something that you can start taking back into your hands, because well, hopefully we can make things better, but in as I see the things, in the long term future, we will need to harvest our own food in order to have like enough for the daily basis. So just start now, take a look on how it works. It's very fun. and just keep in touch with Earth.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank
I just want to thank everybody who tuned in today. Please join us again tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.